Hello, 10th grade pre-AP Scorpions. Mr. D here. We are going to be getting into chapter 2 of A Separate Piece. Before we get started, just so you know, I'd rather focus on a tree than on me. I don't like looking up my own nostrils when I check my video to see how well I did or how poorly I did. I don't mind hearing my voice so much as seeing my face, and especially my hairy nostrils grosses me out. I'm sure it does you too. So therefore, we will focus on a couple of trees. There we go. Very nice. Okay, so hopefully, son of a gun. Take two. All right. So, in chapter 2 of A Separate Piece, starts off where the boys are skipping dinner. Now remember, Mr. Prudhomme is a substitute headmaster. The headmaster, like we talked about in chapter 1, he is away in DC for the summer doing something war related. And again, the boys, Finney in particular, are taking full advantage of having a substitute headmaster. When the boys get called on it for missing dinner, naturally Finney goes into one of his many stories, and he talks about how it has to do with, when they were born, when they're draftable, the class ahead of them, and then he brings in even the idea of, if you want to think about it from a sexual point of view, which I really don't care to think about the sexual lives of my parents too much. Now, when he does all of this, Mr. Prudhomme, he is just completely caught off guard. He doesn't know what to do. The most simple solution, let him get away with it. Now you say, well, why? Well, the idea is the boys are completely unaware that the war is so close in their future. And that lack of awareness is allowed by the adults because, again, they're the generation that they fought World War One. They're the generation they lived through the hardships of World War One, even if they weren't fighting. And because of that, they see a future for these boys that is going to be anything but innocent, fun, and peaceful. Therefore, they allow them to get away with a little more than they normally would. So again, it says here on a couple pages into chapter 2, this was the way the masters tended to treat us that summer. And many of you in your responses quoted, I think we reminded them of what peace was like, we boys of 16. And another quote, we reminded them of what peace was like, of lives which were not bound up with destruction. And then Phineas was the essence of this careless peace. Now, what you have to wonder about here, a couple things. One of them being, if Finney is the essence of this careless peace, is it because he is enthusiastic and because he is, high energy and he's endearing? I mean, he's the kind of kid who he might get into little bits of trouble here and there, but he doesn't do anything malicious. He is certainly not a bad kid. So while you're thinking about that, you also have to wonder, what kind of an effect does all of this have on Gene? Gene is absolutely in a position of being like Finney's secondhand man, yet he is not comfortable putting himself in a position where he might get into trouble. And this leads to a lot of envy and resentment, and we're going to get to that soon enough. Okay. Reading on into the chapter, we start getting into the luncheon that Mrs. Patch Withers, the substitute headmaster's wife, is hosting. It's sort of like an afternoon tea, a private school little formal gathering where people are supposed to, wear the school attire, the jacket to tie, all of that. And Finney shows up in a pink shirt. Now, again, is it because he is making a fashion statement? No, he's wearing something loud, something that's going to stand out. In the 1940s, men didn't necessarily dress in pink. It wasn't the time of bright pastel colors, so on and so forth. So he's wearing the shirt to get attention. But then what he does even more so is when he puts on the school's tie as a belt, he is certainly not doing that because he wants to hold up his pants. I mean, he could find some other way, but the school tie. And when he gives it his idea that the bombing campaigns going on in Central Europe, and it's sort of like his emblem and his support for the war. What you start to see as an adult is somebody who's pushing limits, trying to get away with things, but even more so, somebody who has a certain romanticized ideal of war, of what war is. The idea that, well, we're not upperclassmen, so we can't really train and do the calisthenics like the others are doing, so we have to do something to show our support for the war. Again, it's anything beyond what would be acceptable, but he's walking such a fine line where you're not going to say to him, oh, you're going to have consequences because of this. The administration, they didn't really know what to do about Finney because he always walked that very fine line. But again, what you have to remember too is he's a very likable kid. So Gene, when all of this was happening, he got really excited because he was thinking, wow, Finney's going to get in trouble. Something's going to happen this time. It's going to be amazing. He is going to get in so much trouble. And then he talks his way right out of it again. And we start to notice envy in Gene. Envy, resentment. Think of Finney as like the very popular kid who everybody likes and everybody wants to be around. And think of Gene as a less outgoing kid, much more reserved. Somebody who is kind of living in the shadow of the popular kid. That's the dynamic between the two of them. So as you read on, consider that. Something else that you really need to consider is we're getting this story from a very vulnerable perspective. This is the perspective of Gene. This is the perspective of somebody who obviously is very self-conscious, is very conservative in his values and his behaviors and his morality, yet he's being dragged into a lot of things and he doesn't want to miss out. But at the same time, he is not comfortable in the least. So there's going to be a lot more character development and a lot more to talk about as we get to that. So we get close to the end of the chapter, and as we're getting close to the end of the chapter, what we notice is, the boys are now going to go back to the tree again. They're going to jump from the tree, and they want to talk about, hey, well, we got to make this into some kind of a club. This has to be like a formal thing. We could have a name. What kind of name would we have? And they end up coming up with the Super Suicide Society of the Summer Session. And if you think about just the alliterative aspect of that, we can understand that. But why would it have to be Suicide Society? And again, the concept of danger comes in. The idea of doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, and especially the idea of a rite of passage. I'm not going to talk anymore about the rite of passage right now, because if we did talk about the rite of passage, I'd give things away. And for those of you who've either not read ahead or not finished the book, I don't want to do that. The last thing, and probably a very important aspect of the remainder of the story, is the idea that the boys were going to do a double jump. Gene and Finney were both going to jump from the tree. And they're on the limb. They're ready to sort of like flex down and jump out so they can get into the deepest water. And right when they're about to do that, Gene loses his balance and Finney grabs hold of him and stabilizes him. So now immediately there's that aspect of, he put me in this situation. He put me in danger. He could have killed me. But coupled with that is but he saved my life. He did the right thing. He grabbed onto me. And at the very end of the chapter, it says here, if Finney hadn't come up right behind me, if he hadn't been there, I could have fallen on the bank, broken my back. So he ends saying, Finney had practically saved my life. So there's going to be this aspect almost of like Gene feels like he owes him something because Finney saved him on the tree. Okay, I am going to sign off from the mountains. Kind of a gloomy day today. I do plan to get Lily back involved in these videos soon, and I will end you guys with a advertisement for Dakine Diegos and a Stingham. Miss you. Hope you're doing well. And what I would like you to do, same as before, is send me a reflection, something from the chapter 2 lecture that you either didn't pick up on, or expand on one of my ideas. Expand on something that I went over and tell me what it makes you think about, make a personal connection, just some sort of a reflective aspect. So take care, everybody. I hope you are doing well. I hope your families are doing well, and I will hopefully see you very soon.